Right, it's 7 o'clock. Sorry, it's 5 o'clock. Making that classic error. It's 5 o'clock, and welcome to the executive on the 21st of December, 2023. We'll start with item 1. Apologies for absence. None. Item 2, leaders' announcements. Just to say thank you very much for everyone coming out at such a late time in the year and an early hour. So thank you for that. And just to remind everyone present that obviously we're being webcast as usual. Speak obviously to our microphones when we want to speak. And with that, we move to item 3, which is the minutes of the 21st of December. No, it's the minutes of the 20th of November. 28th of November, that's it. Apologies, sorry. 28th of November, which is on pages 5 to 25 of the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer if you're happy for those minutes? Hermione, thank you. And a seconder?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to propose.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions? No? Okay. So they've been proposed and seconded. Should we vote in favour of those minutes, please? Thank you very much. Anyone against or abstaining? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay, thank you. Item 5. So moving on to the budget 2024-25 and the medium-term financial plan 2024 to 34, it says here. Pages 26 to 46 of the agenda pack. And this will be presented by Councillor Carl Britton, Executive Member for Financial Sustainability.
Thank you, Leader. I would like to introduce the paper for the budget 2024-25 and the medium-term financial plan 2024 to 2034. This is the first budget of the new joint administration, and this paper sets out the current financial position using the latest information we have. This is not a final budget, but an important step that will help shape how the final budget will look. The budget as currently presented is not balanced, but seeks to identify the level of change that is needed to ensure balance occurs. Setting a balanced budget is a legal duty of the Council. It was clear from the medium-term financial plan published at Council in March this year that significant savings needed to be made over the next 4 years. Since that time, there have been many changes to forecasts, it seems almost on a weekly basis, and these overall have significantly worsened the financial position in the last 9 months. The Council is not in a good position to absorb these shocks. Recent years have seen high inflation, which has increased Council costs, whilst at the same time government support has been reducing in real terms, and Council tax increases capped at 2.99% have also failed to keep pace with inflation. However, perhaps the biggest issue affecting this Council is the level of debt it has accrued. Over the past 5 years, there has been significant capital spending by the previous administration. The 4 big projects alone at Northgate End, Grange Paddocks, Art and Leisure Centre and Hertford Theatre have cost over £90 million. This was more than the Council could finance without substantial borrowing. The twin effects of inflation and higher interest rates have combined to firstly increase that debt level as costs rose, and secondly to increase the cost of the interest on the debt. Debt impacts the revenue budget in 2 ways. First, through the interest payable on the debt, and also through the minimum revenue provision, which is the way the Council ensures it can repay the debt. In 2024-25, the budget cost for these 2 elements is £3.99 million, rising to £4.65 million next year. By contrast, in the budget of 2020 to 21, there was just an interest figure of £207,000. The £3.8 million additional burden on the costs of running the Council this year compared to 4 years ago is perhaps the biggest single reason that such large savings need to be made elsewhere. Given the current borrowing position, it is therefore absolutely the right thing to do to only undertake further borrowing now where there is a genuine and clear investment case to do so. This is essential to bringing council finances back under control in the medium term. The proposed capital programme is presented in Appendix B. A key point to note is the change to spending at Old River Lane. The proposal is for a much reduced spend until borrowing has come down to a more sustainable level. This is unlikely to occur within the next 4 years unless there is a very substantial change to national policy on local government funding. In addition to the reductions in the spending programme, the Council is proposing to look for opportunities to sell non-essential assets. This will help bring borrowing levels down, reducing the burden of debt. It should also be noted that when this process occurs, a physical asset is merely being substituted with a cash asset, and it does not mean that the Council's financial position deteriorates. If the right assets are sold, it could represent a long-term benefit. Appendix A details the General Fund revenue budget and medium-term financial plan. This sets out the costs of running the council and the revenue it receives through grants and council tax. These figures already include a number of savings already being implemented under existing delegations, plus planned increases to fees and charges, along with forecast changes to costs. At this stage, the budget indicates to us the scale of further savings needed to achieve a balanced budget for 2024-25. The leadership team have already been working on implementing savings proposals for 2024-25, and I am delighted that a total of £996,000 of savings have already been incorporated into this budget. With the latest estimates, the additional savings needed for 2024-25 are now just £183,000. I am pleased to report that this figure represents less than 1% of all spending, and I feel confident that working with officers we will identify these savings to enable a balanced budget for 2024-25. The following year looks to be far more challenging. A further 3.37 million of savings are needed to balance the budget for 2025-26, and this represents around 15% of the current expenditure figure. This level of saving will be very difficult to achieve, particularly in light of the fact that significant savings often take considerable time to take full effect. So it is very important that we continue to push hard to find these savings. The Council has very low levels of reserves, and a failure to find the savings could lead to serious problems in 25-26 and beyond. Having said that, I am very pleased to report that work on finding savings is continuing apace, and proposals will be presented to Audit and Governance Committee on January the 30th, along with the budget and medium-term financial plan. While seeing a set of numbers can seem quite reassuring, we need also to be mindful that the world is not a static environment, and that all these forecasts are subject to change due to events that occur either within East Herts Council or external to it. A sudden rise in interest rates, for example, could quickly turn a balanced budget into a perilous financial position. Our reserves are very low, and if we do have the opportunity to contribute to reserves this year, we should undoubtedly take it. The savings needed in 25-26 are so large that some buffer is needed, should any of the planned savings estimates prove optimistic. The single largest source of revenue for the Council is council tax. As a Council, we are restricted to increasing our share of council tax by 2.99% without a costly referendum. This restriction has severely impacted the revenue budget over the last 2 years, as CPI inflation peaked at 11.1% in October 2022. The proposal this year is to increase our share of the council tax by 2.99%. This is absolutely necessary given the financial position of the council and given the precarious state of local government finances around the country. It is likely to be normal for all district councils in England. We should also bear in mind that in an unfavourable economic climate, collection rates for council tax could reduce, with more residents claiming council tax support. The paper details many of the other forecast and assumptions built into the budget calculations. There are many uncertainties. Most notable is the failure of national government to provide clear and timely guidance for the years ahead, and there will undoubtedly be changes to some of the forecasts before the budget is finalised. I'll be happy to take questions on the paper, and I move that we accept the recommendations listed on page 27 and 28 of the agenda reports pack.
Thanks, Carl. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Thanks, Vicky. Thank you very much, Vicky. Right. Questions and comments. Chris, thanks.
Thank you. First of all, thanks, Carl and Stephen as well for your hard work with this report and budget. Also, I think I'll speak for all the executives saying that we would welcome any suggestions from any members, any parties in terms of savings that we need to make, and I'm happy to listen to any of those at any time. The second thing I wanted to say was that I completely agree with the fact that it's very unfortunate that we have the level of debt that we have, and that in this chamber at some point over the last 4 years, we did point out that having 4 capital projects at once was imprudent and would affect the revenue and the budget. And it's also very unfortunate that this has led to the delay on the Old River Lane project. And you could argue that had we had less capital projects, albeit all of them are good things to have, that we might have been able to prioritise Old River Lane. And while there might be bias being in Bishop Stortford, we've had a lot more housing in Bishop Stortford than elsewhere thus far in the district. And you could certainly argue that we therefore need such a project to go forward. But at this point, it's clear that it's very, very difficult to do so, if not impossible, due to the circumstances we found ourselves in. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. Any other comments, questions? Marnie?
Thank you, Leader. I would agree with Councillor Wilson on this. I do bitterly regret the situation in which we find ourselves. It has come as a great shock and cause of dismay to all of us to find ourselves in this financial position. I understand the logic behind all these proposals, and I do know we have to be responsible and we do have to take action. It is a bitter pill to swallow, and especially for the people of Bishop Stortford, as it seems that one of the really big effects of all of this is that the Old River Lane project at Bishop Stortford, the provision of the Arts Centre, is being delayed way into the future. So I and the people of Bishop Stortford are especially disappointed with this. However, it is a bitter pill, and I think we will have to swallow it, and we will have to do what is financially prudent and do the best that we can. Thank you, Leader. Thank you.
Thanks, Marnie. Any other comments, questions, Joe? Oh, okay, Alex?
Could you explain why we're spending more to finish Hertford Theatre? I know that's part of it, but why we're doing that?
So the rationale between the extra, I mean, there's obviously another meeting coming up about Hertford Theatre, but obviously in the budget at the moment we have to make an assumption that there is going to be the extra spend in Hertford Theatre. And that's because it simply makes financial sense, because we've already spent a lot of money on Hertford Theatre, and the return on the extra investment, on the extra money for Hertford Theatre is probably the best way we could use extra borrowing. If we don't choose not to go ahead with Hertford Theatre, we end up with an investment which effectively gives us no return. And therefore it puts into question the viability of the council.
Okay, thanks. Joe?
Yeah, I think it's been said quite a lot of times, hasn't it, in lead up to this term, that there's going to be very difficult decisions to make for the next administration, and this is where we find ourselves. But I think it's important to sort of put 2 points on that. One, we have to make difficult decisions, and as an executive, we're going to do those, even if they are tough, because we're going to be brave enough to make those decisions and make that budget balance. And I have every confidence that for this next year, we are going to get a balanced budget, and we will work hard with officers to do everything we can to balance the budget going forward. But it's very important for residents to sort of realise what brought us here, and we've raised that it is central government funding has been reduced and reduced and reduced over the last 10, 12 years, and also the capital programme that we've inherited. So there is a practice, and anyone who learns corporate finance will learn about corporate budgeting. Sorry, capital budgeting. This is a process where when you borrow money to invest, you calculate at different interest rate points in the future what those consequences could be. And we haven't got high interest rates. We've got interest rates that are fairly typical over the longer term in the past. So it'd be interesting, or it's worrying that it is being seen as such a shock that our repayments are now so high, when in reality interest rates were low when these decisions were made, and now they've gone back to normal. And it's very prudent to plan at different interest rate points. So what we're presented with are difficult choices and a very worrying budget. And when we first started to look at these, and when I first started to look, I did think perhaps a sensible course of action would be to move to Scotland, but that's not where we find ourselves. We find ourselves in a situation where we will take those tough decisions because that's what the residents of East Herts expect of us. And they will think that some of these decisions, they might disagree with some of these decisions. But I think it's really important to understand the reasons that we're taking them. And the reasons that we're taking them are for the benefit of the council. And these are not things that we want to do. These are things that we have to do.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think that's a really good point. That we face difficult decisions where we have to protect services above all else for the vulnerable. We've got to ensure that residents still get the services that they need. And obviously, we don't want to send the council into a situation where we're getting broke. I think 4 in 10 county councils are facing questions about their meeting their budget gaps in the next year. I think the LGA stated that I think 1 in 5 councils as a whole are seriously considering declaring Section 114 next year or the year after. And so we're facing some significant issues from, as you say, government underfunding for the last decade, but also from that capital that's been spent and has really left us in a very, very difficult situation. Questions? Other questions? Graham? No? Graham, after you. Oh,
sorry. Can I start off by wishing everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year before we get into business? Right. I think, Ben, you summed it up quite nicely that, and Joe, that all the councils throughout the land are facing the pressures that we actually face, and there's no council that's escaped from it, and that's a reality, and we've got to live up to that. I believe that over the next 2 years, councils are going to be short of approximately £4 billion to run the services. So if we put that into perspective across all the councils in the UK, that's a lot of money. And Joe, I wouldn't go to Scotland. They've just introduced another tax, if you're not aware. And I think it's a 45% tax or something like that. So they're highly taxed in Scotland. Now, what I would like to do is, on inflation, that's been raised, and inflation has come down far quicker this month than what was actually expected. And I'm just wondering how that is going to impact on the finances moving forward. And I think the expectation is going to come down again in the next few months, but we don't know what's going to happen with the Red Sea and ships having to go a sort of 2-week detour. So if somebody could sort of maybe give me advice on how that impacts on the finances.
Yeah, obviously within the budget for next year, inflation has been factored in there at a certain rate, and I'm trying to think it's either 4 or 5%. I'll look that up in a moment. And obviously, if inflation is less than that, then it's possible the effects of inflation won't be as severe, and it may mean that the budget then looks more prudent or becomes more prudent than it appears at the moment. But obviously, yeah, it's all assumptions and it's all unknowns. And you know, we saw in 2021 when obviously kind of the Russia-Ukraine thing started, how a world event in some distant land can suddenly send inflation through the roof in a matter of a couple of months. So, yeah, we have to make an assumption, and it's possible that we'll have a situation where our assumption is proved pessimistic, and that would be great, because we've still got to bear in mind 25-26 when we've got some real challenges. I mean, this year is, you know, straightforward in comparison to 25-26. So the more that we can put in reserves over the next 12 months, or from so April to 24 to 25, the better position we are in for 25-26. So yeah, I'll be delighted if inflation is a lot lower and if our costs are not as impacted as much as they are in the budget, because it will just give us a little bit more headroom for the following year.
Right. There's an area in the budget, car parking. Over the past couple of years, there's been a number of car parks in Bishopsthorpe and Hertford that either underperformed or been over budgeted for, or have been very successful in introducing active travel and getting people to move from cars to walking and cycling. Have them lines in the budget been rectified or aligned with what is actual the income revenue rather than expected revenue that's far excess of what is achievable?
I believe what's happened in the budget at the moment is that the assumptions on revenue per car parking have been increased by the CPI factor, which is 6.7%, which was set in September, and that determines the increase from April. So I believe the income from car park fees has been adjusted by that 6.7%. We are, as a separate exercise, going to be looking at car parks and a more detailed review of the kind of ones that underperform and the ones that overperform, and trying to find a better balance in the way the fees and charges work. But that's a separate exercise. The budget at the moment, as I say, is just an overview, but there will be more detail looked at in the budget by officers over the next kind of month or two that may go down to kind of like that more granular level that will enable us to pick up where perhaps performance over the current year is possibly indicating that we need to adjust the budget again for the following year. So yeah, there'll be further adjustments to be made.
Yeah, the underachieving budget level is substantial in a number of car parks, and that does need to be realigned if it hasn't been. Now, I'm very interested, coming from Bishopsthorpe, that you've got a line in there for investment of £175,000. Could you tell me more about that?
Is this to do with
Yes,
water lane?
it's got, yes.
So yeah, so there's in the capital budget there is an amount there for investment into that building to make some improvements there.
Could I ask what that investments are? Because the hole itself is up and running.
I'm not sure of the detail. I'm not sure. I mean, I know it needs maintenance, but yeah, I'm not sure the exact detail of the maintenance. Stephen, do you want to?
The Civic Federation, were doing the asset for community value, commissioned surveyors to look at the building, and they said there was a package of about £170,000 worth of maintenance that needed doing on the building. So in lieu of the fact that we haven't sent surveyors in ourselves, I've made up to £170,000 there to meet to meet the cost that the surveyors, the Civic Federation, when they examined the hall, said needed doing.
Okay, thank you.
So can I say that in Bishop Stortford, we enjoy some really good community centres. It's really well run. Havers, St Michael's Mead, Bishop's Park, Thorley and Castle Park. Now, if I was a resident from Buntingford and seen capital programme there for £175,000 for a building that's up and running, fully operational, and you've just closed down a pool in Buntingford, why wouldn't that 175,000 be directed to get the Ward Freeman pool in Buntingford operational, not to be all singing and all dancing, but operational for the residents and the schools all round about a radius within Buntingford to make it operational? I don't agree with that £175,000 for a building that's functioning.
So I'm quite familiar with the pricing in Buntingford. I mean, yes, it'd be lovely if we could fund the Buntingford situation. So the minimum estimated cost for the filtration system is, because of the nature of the pipe work, it would have to drain the pool, and there's risks associated with that. And there's quite a lot of work that needs to take place, and the pool plant room needs updating. So the minimum estimated cost is 543,000. That was from an old estimate. However, there's other costs. So there's issues with the boiler, and you know already that Buntingford runs at a loss at the moment of £10,000 a month. And as was advised in the previous Conservative budget setting and in this budget setting, any new capital spend has to be able to pay for itself, and investing just in those minimum fixes, well, it would cost a lot more than 175,000, but just the pool plant and the filtration tank, the 543,000, that pool would still be running at a loss of £10,000 a month. So I know that previously earmarked amount was closer to 881,000, and at one point that went up to £1.1 million at one point, because it was identified that having a gym added to the facility would then hopefully enable it to sort of wash its face, because it would, like, pools generally speaking are loss making, but adding a gym or adding some additional functionality to it would help them make it break even. But that obviously is substantially more than that 175,000. That would be closer to 1 million plus probably now to be able to do all the work to then bring it up to a point of kind of breaking even and justifying those costs from an angle of it having to pay for itself as any new capital investment. Yeah, so that's kind of a version of the answer.
Has the document been released for public?
The report, it's not been on the website. I've shared it with residents, but I can ask for it to go up on the East Herts Council website as well.
Because that only is one quote from a company that wants to do the work, that report, as opposed to an independent report.
So the report,
and what I'm speaking about is making the pool functional for people to use rather than all singing, all dancing.
so that report I think was referring to basic functionality because of the costs of the work, and also it will involve draining the pool, and there are additional risks of the pool sides collapsing, which would then cost them a lot. And basically, we don't want to be in a situation where we set aside sort of half the money and, you know, we drain the pool and then suddenly the sides collapse and there's significantly more work that we then don't have any funding for. But that 543 didn't represent an all singing, all dancing. That was the basic kind of spend to then bring it up to become a compliant facility.
The last two annual reports on leisure didn't raise or highlight any challenges within the Ward Freeman pool, and I'm just wondering why that was when you mentioned to the executive that there'd been some concern for some time and it hadn't been raised through the official channels. Are you able to explain that? This is official documents, so annual reports.
So you're saying that no one was aware that there were any problems with Buntingford?
I'm saying
Your
there's nothing in
administration.
the annual reports.
Which annual reports? Are you talking about the budgetary reports?
No. Leisure reports. Official reports.
So you mean the 22, 23 report?
20,
The 22,
21,
21, 22?
yeah,
I mean, I
and
think
2021.
you'd have to
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
maybe talk to the member for at that time to find out.
Yeah, and he himself is quite taken aback that nothing's been mentioned in the reports, and all of a sudden this is sort of evolved.
It was
I would say that the works, there was a plan to do the work in 2020, which included a new filtration system, new boiler system, retiling the pool and upgrading it. And I can't imagine that they would have included the need for the new filtration system and the new boiler system if these things didn't present an issue.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what was in the reports as opposed to what you're saying.
Well, there was lines in the budget, weren't there, for it? I mean, it was in the budget, so it was known in the previous budget.
Anyway,
Well, presented at executive.
as I say, if I was a resident in Buntingford and seen that amount of money being invested in a building that's functional, I would be asking questions.
I mean, I would say that in the previous budget setting, Ward Freeman was taken out of the committed budget and put into approved not yet committed, meaning that no actual money was set aside for it. And that was a recorded vote. And there are many Conservatives that voted for the budget, which included that. So we arrived in the situation without any actual committed budget available to invest in Ward Freeman.
Yeah, we've got to understand the detail behind whatever. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll leave it there. Oops, sorry.
Right.
I think it's
Yeah.
worth
Tim.
saying that, you know, we're anxious not to make the same mistakes about not doing preventative maintenance. So the URC falls exactly into that category. We want to spend the money to keep it a functional facility and not, like Buntingford Pool, let it drain away and just waste away and not then be functional, which is exactly what's happened. And we do not want to repeat this exercise.
But then again, if the site gets redeveloped, there was plans for it to come down. So that was another way on.
Okay, right, thanks. Miley.
Thank you, Leader. I would like to agree with Councillor Hoskin. He's absolutely right. If you have any building, any house, it has to be maintained to keep it safe and to keep it to be fit for purpose. And the URC Hall has been recognised as an asset of community value. It needs to be maintained. And it is therefore prudent and wise to set aside some money for that maintenance. And what has been set aside is much less than what would be required to bring the neglected pool, neglected under Conservative administration, to bring that up to standard just to be safe. So I fully support this money being set aside for the asset of community value. Thank you, Leader.
Alex.
What seems quite clear to me from the information presented to us is that previous administration chose to spend money on capital projects in Bishop Stortford and Hertford, and now there is no money left for the swimming pools in Ward Freeman for a start. And that's the choices that were made by the previous administration.
Carl?
Yes, I'll just come back to that figure that the amount we pay, or we're budgeting to pay in 2024-25 towards repayment and service of the debt is £3.8 million a year more than it was in 2020. With that £3.8 million, we could probably repair 4 swimming pools like Ward Freeman, but that money is now not available because of the debt level, which obviously is something we've inherited.
Joe?
Yeah, with respect, Councillor McAndrew, and first of all, thank you for coming here because there's not many other members that have come. So no, but seriously, if we want to listen, we can only listen if people turn up and talk. But with respect to those residents who are asking that question, I think the answer is they need to look at what's happened in the past. And where we're looking at deficits that we are going forward, and we're highlighting this £170,000, and I understand why you're doing it, but I think it's the wrong question if residents are asking that.
On the whole, will the 100,
Okay, all right, I'll let you come back.
all right, on the whole, will the £175,000 be earmarked? I've chaired most of the community centres in Bishop's Stortford and probably sat on every one of the committees, and we've done inward investment. Now, I think from what I'm hearing is there's been underinvestment in the United Reform Hall, which is no different from what you're saying has happened at Ward Freeman Pool. Is that correct? That's the signals I'm getting.
No. So I mean,
Well,
my understanding is that this
there's
is
no-
essential maintenance. This is money for essential maintenance that's been put aside.
I don't understand essential maintenance because nobody here can tell me what that essential maintenance is.
Well,
And yet you've earmarked £175,000.
Stephen did give an answer of where that money,
If I'm
where that
running a
figure came
community
from.
centre,
Yeah,
£175,000.
That answer was provided, Councillor McAndrew. That came from the report. So, Yvonne.
Thank you, Leader. I understand the challenge that you face as an executive, and I'm not challenging any of the principles, but I wanted to ask a couple of questions about the elements that relate to Old River Lane. The first question is whether it's correct that East Herts will still retain the freehold of the land at the southern part of the site, because I believe the legacy was that most part of the site was going to go to City Heart in partnership, and that the southern portion, 20%, would be kept freehold by the district council, and that there isn't actually any specific use that has to be done on that site. You have a fairly wide choice about what happens to that piece of land in the long term. And so the second question is about the arts, what is being called the Arts Centre. I have no problem with that being paused, but my concern is that the Arts Centre still means what it meant under the last administration and what it is defined as in the draft development agreement. Because in the development agreement, it is defined as a leisure and entertainment facility, including a cinema. And that's a very specific scheme. And I wonder whether when you're looking at what is being paused, whether you're looking at something very fixed, an old idea that doesn't have planning permission, doesn't have much support in Bishop Stortford, was never fully understood. And so that's the question is whether there's somehow you're fixed with that old concept, and whether the definition of that can be changed. Because if you're not fixed on that, it feels a little bit as if you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. If it's paused and nothing happens and it's made into a landscape square, does that mean that we're not going to carry on thinking about what else could happen on that land, such as the relocation of another public facility that might be better on that land, or whether there's a commercial arts use, like a commercial cinema, Everyman Curzon Picture House, that would just go there as a commercial proposition, or things like that. Are they? I know that this is kind of going into development board territory, but are these things that are still going to be kept alive, rather than the whole thing freezing? Because it does feel as if there are other possibilities.
I think I can have a go at answering that. I think Hermione, you can come in if I so my understanding is that the aim is still to build an arts centre of a form. You know, we committed to do a consultation on the form of that arts centre. So I don't think that it's set in stone what that arts centre would look like when it comes along. I don't think that's been decided yet. I think we were clear in saying that there would be an opportunity to get residents' views, get people's views on what the best thing would be for that site. And I don't think that's changed. I think the budget is recognising the challenge of doing that in the short term, but I think that's still the aim at the moment.
Yeah, the art centre, as we understood it, there was a building. We saw. I mean, it's illustrative, but there was a building, and it was essentially a 5-screen cinema, and the most important part of that is that it had a price tag of 15.5 million, and that consultation. Yes, I hope that consultation will happen because you know, I hope that we look at absolutely completely different alternatives, which don't cost anywhere near like 15.5 million, which don't give you this headache. So it's accepting what you're saying about not being able to afford 15.5, and having the scope to look at other possibilities, maybe on a much smaller scale, but something that is. So that's what I would hope.
Marnie, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Leader. No, I agree with you 100%. The ambition is still to provide an art centre on that site and to build an art centre. There will be consultation when some more practical ideas have been formulated, and then the residents of Bishop Stortford and the district will have the opportunity to submit their ideas and to make comments. But the ambition of this council is very much, yes, to provide an art centre as soon as it can afford it at some time in the future, but it is paused for the time being.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could, so yes, I wonder if I could just leave a suggestion that if we could talk about arts and culture rather than an art centre, I think it gives you as the administration much more flexibility for considering different sorts of things that would fulfil the objectives of the planning guidance. The planning guidance is the only thing that you really have to address here. But there are just 2 other questions. One was, in this interim, that all the circumstances have changed here. Part of that freehold land is occupied by Charrington's House. So what is the immediate intention for Charrington's House? Does that stay there? And secondly, going back to the URC Hall, I know this is delivery board matter, and we know that there are limits on how much flexibility, how much the site pieces can be moved around. But it is just so patently clear that if the hall was kept and this maintenance money was spent, and then over time more money was put in, and that became the arts and culture element, then it is win-win in every case, because we keep the building, that becomes a better centre for culture, and then there's freedom, much more freedom over how the freehold land is used.
Thank you. I think that's a good point. Vicky, do you want to comment?
I was just going to say, I think we're going into quite a lot of detail on one particular item when we've got 10 years worth of budget to approve.
No, fair comment. But we hear what you're saying. Thank you. Yeah. Other questions? David.
Just a quick comment on the Waterlane Hall before I ask my question. It's worth remembering that that property was bought by previous administration with a view to demolishing it. So it's hardly surprising that a lot of maintenance has not been spent on it. My instinct is that £170,000 is obviously welcome, but that money will go very quickly on things like heating for the hall, which doesn't exist at present. My question is, the budget is saying we're going to raise £6 million from selling assets. When will that list of assets be published?
The list of assets is literally only just forming at the moment, so I don't have a date I can give you at the moment in time. It's going to be an ongoing process.
And I think there was a full list of assets, of East Herts assets, if you want to have a look at it, that came out at a meeting, I think in March.
Well,
That's the full list.
obviously you might be selling all.
Oh, well, hopefully not. But that, if you know, at the moment, that's the list that we can offer.
Okay, but the 6 million must have derived from somewhere. So there must be a list. It's just a question you're not prepared to release at present.
That's right.
I think what we can say is that the actual assets on the list of things that we could sell is much more than that, but we obviously have to spend time looking at those in more detail. So we haven't had a chance to do that yet.
No. And obviously the budget process, this is the first stage in the budget process. It's going to go to audit governance. There's these processes that allow these discussions to happen. Okay, Joe.
I'll just come back on that as well. Again, it falls into the difficult decisions that we've been forced to make. It's not, we haven't come into power thinking, what can we sell? We've come into power with a budget that needs to be balanced, and working with officers, it's been agreed that this is a reasonable sum to help plug the gaps, and to make all the numbers work and to make it balanced. That's the figure that's been agreed. And then, the process after will be to look at what those specific items are. But I presume, Carl, that will go through audit and governance, that will maybe other committees, and all members will have an opportunity to discuss and have it.
I'm sure that's correct, yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Sarah, yeah, sorry.
I would just like to come back on the Buntingford thing. I feel that the implication is that nothing was known about any needs for repairs, which I personally don't really believe would be the case. I was told in June with Carl that there were significant repair issues, and I find it very unlikely that that was unknown about by anyone in the former administration up until May. I'd be very happy to ask officers to share with me any emails or discussions that were had sort of prior to that point. But to me, if it's genuinely the case that nobody knew, that would suggest possibly a communication issue within the previous administration, maybe. But yes, I can certainly make some inquiries and feedback. Thank you.
Could I?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, great.
My emphasis was on, there was 2 annual reports come out and nothing was raised in that report. That was what I said. If we go back and look at these reports and take it from there.
Yeah, share the reports. I think that'll be useful. Right, any more questions? Anything else? Okay. Well, I think we have 6 recommendations for the executive to make. They're detailed on pages 27 and 28 of the agenda pack. Oh, sorry, Sarah. Oh, okay.
So, sorry, just to go back on the Buntingford thing again. There is also the other issue of there being a requirement for agreement with Hertfordshire County Council. This was never just an East Herts District Council decision, because Hertfordshire County Council is liable for 40% of the costs. And I believe that there was an issue around obtaining agreement and permission previously for those works, and possibly at this point as well, which is another factor. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so we finished the debate. The recommendations for this item, as I say, are detailed on pages 27 and 28 of the agenda pack. Is it okay if we take them on block? Yeah, okay. So can I have a show of hands for those in favour of those recommendations, please? Thank you very much. Any against or abstain? Thank you. That's carried. Right, we're moving on now to item 6 on the agenda, which is the Waste Recycling and Street Cleansing Service Design Plan, which is on pages 47 to 90 of the agenda pack. And I'll hand over to Councillor Tim Hoskin, who's the Executive Member for Environmental Sustainability, to present the report. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Leader. So a summary then to start off with for this report. The Waste Recycling and Street Cleansing Service represents the largest spend on East Hart services and probably gives Carly's biggest headache. It's a high profile service which impacts on residents every week, and as well as having a huge impact on the council's finances, it also has significant impacts and influences on the council's ability to achieve its carbon reduction and sustainability aims for the district. Reducing waste and recycling more, reducing the carbon impacts of residual waste to landfill or energy for waste facilities are integral to that achievement. During the summer of 2022 and prior to the finalisation of the contract specification, officers worked with members across the political parties and from our partners at North Harts Council to help design services which would meet our financial and environmental sustainability objectives. Executive agreed the service design for the new waste recycling and street cleansing contract on the 25th of October 2022, along with the new aims and principles of the shared service based around delivering services which are both financially and environmentally sustainable. The initial tenders that were received identified that there were affordability issues from the waste recycling and street cleansing services in this next contract, in this new contract. A competitive dialogue procurement process is currently ongoing, and this has allowed officers who are leading the process to explore service design options which may present benefits to the council. On Thursday, the 30th of November, this paper was presented to overview and scrutiny, detailing those options. There was a detailed exploration of the issues, and these are presented in Appendix 4 of this paper. Several comments centred on public consultation, which of course was conducted in the form of extensive dialogue across the members, town and parish councillors, and a survey conducted seeking public opinion to a variety of questions in July and August 2022. From these inputs, the service was designed. The latest set of proposed service delivery change options are both time constrained and are being conducted in a commercially sensitive environment that has precluded wider consultation. Officers are seeking a decision from the executive on the service design options that will be taken forward with the intention of supporting the long-term financial sustainability of the service and the council. By way of context in which this process is taking place, on the 21st of October this year, the government published its long-awaited response to its own consultation on the resources and waste strategy, which resulted in proposed legislative and statutory guidance changes. Officers are in the process of reviewing the information and have and will continue to respond to further consultation on the statutory guidance aimed at supporting the government's simpler recycling proposals. Some elements, even at this stage, of the government's legislative and statutory guidance changes are not aligned with the current contract specification. But at this stage, there is insufficient clarity to make any further formal decisions. It is expected that further decisions will be required in mid-2024 once more detail is known. Officers will continue to work with consultants Eunomia and legal representative Sharp Pritchard to ensure that the procurement process can progress as far as is reasonably practical on its current timeline and provide sufficient opportunities for any necessary changes required to the specification. Whilst this paper has a relatively simple recommendation, there is a wealth of detail contained within it, and the proposals are summarised at 3.2a to k. The confidential financial impacts are tabled in Part 2, Appendix 2. In addition, details of the questions asked, as I mentioned before, at overview and scrutiny are given at Appendix 4. These proposals result from the competitive dialogue between officers and the bidders and represent an opportunity to support a critical outcome, namely the long-term financial sustainability of the new contract. Officers are confident that these changes will still provide high-performing services Indeed, the waste and recycling service design proposed gives residents more opportunity to recycle by providing more recycling capacity. Many of the other proposals merely allow bidders more flexibility in their operations. A final decision is needed to progress with the procurement and not delay the mobilisation of the contract. Due to extremely tight timescales, there will need to be a decision this evening in order to not delay the procurement by a further 3 months. Clearly, any delay would reduce the mobilisation time from approximately 13 months to around 10 months. And given the scale of the mobilisation, that would be highly undesirable. There are new vehicles to buy and impacts on the waste management IT systems, and those cannot be hurried. The IT integrations will be complex. So a final comment, I think this contract gives East and North Herts the ability to shift the emphasis from a residual waste service into a predominantly recycling service. And that significant movement will help minimise unrecycled waste and also allow a sharper focus to be brought onto the size and choice of fuel for our fleet, both of which are hugely supportive of our overall aim to reduce our carbon footprint. So I'd like to offer to take any questions on this, but I propose this paper and its recommendations.
Thanks, Tim. Have I got a seconder for this paper, please? Carl, thank you very much. Right, questions. I just wanted to remind members that and everyone here that there are Appendix 2 is a Part 2 paper. So if you want to refer to anything in that, please let me know, and as we'd have to ensure that that happens with the internet connection off, so without public access. So over to you for questions, comments. I think actually before I think just as with the budget paper, I think we must recognise the huge amount of time and effort that's gone to from officers. I think this has been years in the making, and we should recognise all of that effort and thank them for their hard work. Questions, comments? Carl.
As we heard a short time ago, 25-26 is obviously probably the most difficult year for East Herts Council in terms of the budget. We've obviously got a lot of savings to find for that year, so it's absolutely key that we make this service affordable. And I feel this has been a great step forward. These proposals are a great step forward in making the service affordable. And I think, you know, it's impossible to imagine how we manage without incorporating all these changes.
Right, thank you. Alex?
I was looking at the consultation with the public that was carried out by the previous administration, and I was really impressed by the high support for recycling. So I think these proposals really tick that box. So it's over 78% wanted more recycling, and we're happy to have extra bins in order for them to be able to do that recycling. So that's really positive. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's key, that it's not just financial sustainability, it's environmental sustainability. It's aligned services as well, isn't it, between us and North Herts, which is important. And there's an opportunity still for support for residents, which is key. So yeah, Hermione.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I support these proposals. I think they will be very good in encouraging recycling. I am pleased that allowance is made for some residents who live in maybe terraced houses or flats. If they feel it's too difficult for them to have the extra bins, that they will not be compelled to do so. They can opt out of the extra bin if they wish. So I'm glad that that facility is proposed. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, is it worth saying something about that? That the opportunities there, I think, for I think residents may feel like this is something that's going to come along and be imposed on them, and
yeah,
it's obviously not quite that simple.
It isn't quite that simple, and Chloe knows far better. But I think, you know, we're talking about principles this evening, about a design for a contract which will be let and be on station in May 2025. Between now and then, and you know, based on a decision made this evening, there's a huge amount of work involved in communicating the nuances and the raw detail contained within the contract. And that will be a huge task for East Herts and for North Herts to be able to achieve that succinctly and thoroughly, and get people on board with it, because it really is a huge step forward. Just collecting food waste alone has a massive impact on our carbon footprint, and it frees up so much more space to be able to recycle stuff, not only efficiently, but economically soundly, so that we can, instead of paying for our paper to be separated out and have to pay for the privilege of that, we actually get paper which we can sell, cardboard which we can sell. So, it has huge benefits all around, both financially and environmental, but there is a big communication exercise to go through, and a lot of deep thought needed on implementation, and how we can, having designed for the majority, how we can cope with the minority, and make sure that it certainly isn't a one size fits all, and we will need to, and this is just a word of caution, I think the practicality around it, we will have to try and manage those variations as best we can and try and minimise them, because operationally things that happen in a straight line happen more efficiently, but we need to be able to adapt as well.
Thank you. Vicky.
I'd just like to commend you on the fact that the food waste will be taken weekly, because especially during the summer, I know a lot of residents are unhappy with the fortnightly refuse residual waste collection, because the food waste stinks, basically. So having it on a weekly basis, I think, will give a lot better service to residents.
Joe? Sorry.
Slightly different, and perhaps a question for Tim. So aside from what we've discussed about the very good changes that are coming with huge support in terms of recycling, and quite a good turnout, I understand, on the consultation and the support there. But I just wanted to speak about the service aspects of it, because it's a bit of a cliche that we're held to account, and I certainly feel held to account over the last 4.5 years by a good handful of residents in terms of the performance of the contract. And I think they're going to continue to hold us and Councillor Hoskin to account over the lifetime of this contract. I just wonder what reassurance we can give residents across the district about what the service levels are likely to look like, and what they can expect in that respect.
Yeah, I share your view, and we should be held to account for this, because this is intended to improve, not denigrate services. And I will ask Claire if she wants to make any further comment, but the standards within the contract and the options that we're discussing this evening and shaped within this contract do not erode the standards. They merely give operational flexibility to our operator to be able to use vehicles and manpower more efficiently. So it's what's called an output-based contract. So the outputs are the same, and the expected standard is the same, but how they're set about doing that can be flexed. So instead of having a 3-line whip on having 59 people across the patch poised at 8 AM waiting to sweep up every town centre, by a certain time within the day, the town centre has to look as it would do under the standards, but it gives them the flexibility to have vehicles working in a logical pattern around, rather than trying to cover all bases all at once. And that's a mirrored, that's a theme that's mirrored through the contract. It gives operational flexibility. And these are issues which have been discussed with the contractors, and the bidders collectively or individually, but have agreed that that will encourage savings and more efficient use, which we can then benefit from. But we should be held to account, and I'm briefed every month on the outputs of this contract, so they are monitored within an inch of their lives. These are how we perform against these things. So, Chloe, did you want to add anything?
Unless you've got anything to add, Chloe, but thank you very much, Tim.
Sure, I need to add anything after that. Thank you, Councillor Hoskin. Yes, just to reassure as well members that during the mobilisation of the contract, during the October 22 decision, There was agreement for additional contract monitoring resource to be put in so that we can make sure that mobilisation is smooth. And of course, you know, we're here to ensure that the contract is run effectively and smoothly and that standards don't fall to unacceptable levels. So that is the role of the client team. And of course, we're always keen to hear from residents and members where things are not quite up to scratch, and we'll continue to work on any areas that do need improving.
Thank you. Any more comments, questions? Oh, two at the back. Okay. I'll start with you, Joe, if that's all right.
Yes, I'd like to talk about Appendix 2. So,
Oh, can we come back to you?
yeah, there
Back to you then, if that's all right.
yeah, of course.
Graham.
Few observations. On the food waste side of it, I believe prior to you taking on, Tim, we were discussing that food waste could maybe be introduced not at the time of the new contract, but slightly later. Is that still the case? We've learnt quite a lot from the initial contract being implemented about what was good, what was bad, how the staff amalgamated together, and a lot of that bits and pieces are sort of, you know, they've all gone in the background now, so it should be a smoother transaction. I was just wondering how the new contract at this time and moment you envisage it being implemented, a step at a time, or?
Well, again, I will do my best to answer that, Graham, and then Chloe will give you the answer. So my belief is that we're not going to go with food waste immediately in May, but we will have a limited dispensation to be able to move that off to a later date, so that we're not trying to sprint right from the start. Now, the detail of when and how that will come about is part of the implementation thought process. Our concentration at the moment is on making sure we've got a successful bid within the financial constraints, with a successful bidder willing to take on the role. So that's where our focus is. But we'll need to quickly flip into implementation mode as soon as we get into that position.
Yeah, I was just wondering, maybe Chloe could answer this, because the government legislation, I think, was end of April, end of March, April 2025. And have we received dispensation, or have they relaxed that law?
Yes, just to confirm, the government have indicated that the requirement to introduce mandatory separate food waste collections will actually be by March 2026 now. So we will be bringing that in prior to that date. At the moment, we have got some flexibility at the start of the contract, obviously dependent on which bidder ends up winning. And it allows us for implementation of our service changes up to 4 months. And of course, we'll be looking at where does that fall in terms of summer holidays and, you know, different bank holidays and things like that before we finalise the actual exact dates for implementation. But we'll be working on that as part of the mobilisation of the contract once the award of the contract has been given.
One of the other points is currently we use a lot of temporary staff, agency staff, and I was just wondering, have we made progress on recruiting full-time staff, or do we still have the same challenges? And has anything been put in place for the new contract?
Well, it's perhaps worth just points of clarity that we don't employ anybody. This is a contract which is, the bidder will put in place their employment structures to suit their bid. And I guess one of the factors in this, if we start dictating exactly what will happen in that, we will pick up the cost of doing that, because we are then imposing a risk on the contractor to how they manage and resource a contract. So there is an amount of flexibility. We've previously expressed some concerns that the level of temporary staff sometimes can lead to operational issues, but it also leads to training costs for the contractor. So it's not as if they get away scot-free. This is something that should be within their interest to manage within. And also, let's not forget, some of the temporary resources will be extraordinarily competent and will be, you know, just the people we need on this job. So I think to label that up as a bad idea isn't necessarily a bad idea. There will be seasonal fluctuations, and a contractor needs the ability to be able to flex across an annual swing, and temporary resources are an ideal way of them doing that without fixing costs within the contract.
The last contract.
Sorry.
Can Chloe add something?
Just to reassure Councillor McAndrew and other members in the room, we have a large proportion of our contract evaluation linked to social value. 10% of the contract award is linked to social value. And one of the elements that we are assessing as part of social value is staff directly employed from the local area, which is obviously something that is key to us. We want to ensure that that social value is seen in the district and obviously within North Herts. So we do hope that that will have an impact on the amount of agency staff that are coming from further afield and used in general on the contract.
Thank you. I do remember that. On round optimisation, the current contract is rounds within East Hart and rounds within North Hart. Is the plan still to do a round optimisation between the two to reduce the vehicles?
I don't know. I'm getting a yes.
Yes, yeah. There was focus on the current contract around optimisation across the borders, which hasn't essentially come to pass. But in this contract, because we have had extensive dialogue with bidders, it has given us the opportunity to be very clear on our requirements around ensuring that this is one contract serving two authorities rather than one contract operating in East Herts and in North Herts as separate entities. And all of the bidders have reassured that they intend to do cross-boundary working.
I've got a couple of points on the minutes. In the minutes, it seems to have missed out that myself and Councillor Buckmaster asked if the Herts County Council had been contacted, reference the reduction in with the waste. But I see in the minutes, this is not the minutes, but in the main paper, it says officers from Hertfordshire County Council Waste Department were consulted and officers from the Highway Department were consulted. Both myself and Councillor...
I think you'll need to raise this with ONS.
But these have been presented and this is part of this paper and it's not a true reflection of what's actually in the paper.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, but I think that's where it gets approved. Right. So I think that will be the place to raise it. Chloe?
If I can just clarify, following the overview and scrutiny meeting, of course, the executive papers were tweaked based on conversations, and the Herts Highways and Waste Department at Herts County Council were both consulted in between the finalisation of the executive papers and the ONS meeting.
Okay.
I will leave it there, but East Herts and North Herts does lead the pack in the county as a joint waste partnership.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Graham. Other comments, questions? So we come to Joe. So your question is related to Appendix 2, Part 2 of the papers. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So if that's the case, then we have to go through a bit of a rigmarole to just go into Part 2. Is that okay? So I have to read this out, don't I? Yeah. Okay. I move that under Section 100A, Part 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely discussion of exempt information falling within paragraph 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Vicky. And can we have a show of hands to indicate whether you support the motion to exclude the press and public? Thank you very much. his seat. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're now live again. So are there any final comments or questions that anyone wants to make? No, thank you. So the recommendation for this item, the recommendations for this item, there are 9 of them, are on detailed on pages 47 to 49 of the agenda pack. Can I ask for a show of hands in support, please, first? Thank you very much. Any against or abstaining? Thank you very much. That's carried. Thank you. Right, we're on to item 7 of the agenda, urgent business, and there's no urgent business. Thank you very much. Right. So I think I just want to say thank you very much to executive and members who've come along tonight, and especially to officers. I appreciate this late hour on a late day before Christmas. I wish you all happy Christmas, and I wish obviously anyone watching online a happy Christmas as well. And at 18:25, I'll close the meeting.